Hello and welcome as we continue our chronological read through of the Bible. When we left our reading yesterday, God had laid out a plan for redeeming the Hebrews from Egypt, and he had told Moses the part that he had for Moses in that plan. Today we hear Moses' response, and it's not really one of enthusiasm to be about God's word. Actually, chapter 4 of Exodus begins with Moses objecting that the people aren't going to believe him when he tells them what has happened to him. But God gives Moses a sign, takes his staff and turns it into a snake, and then back into a staff again. And if that's enough, he gives Moses a sign of placing his hand into his cloak and drawing it out as leprous, and then restoring it back in, putting his hand back in and restoring it once again to a healthy state. And if that's not enough, Moses was to draw water from the Nile and to pour it out on the land where it would turn into blood, that being, of course, a hint of what was yet to come. With those objection, or with Moses' initial objection decisively overcome, Moses then complains, well, I'm slow of speech and of tongue. God responds that he's the one who makes men able to speak, and that he'll give Moses the words to say, and he'll make them able to say it. Finally, Moses basically speaks what is really on his mind, and he just flat out asks God to send someone else. Well, that angers God, of course, who then tells Moses that his brother Aaron is coming out to meet him, that he'll be glad to see him, that Aaron will be the spokesman for Moses, and he'll speak the words that God gives to Moses to give to Aaron to speak. God then tells Moses to pick up his staff and be on his way. In other words, you're going. Moses goes back to his father-in-law, Jethro. He explains what's happened. He receives Jethro's blessing for the trip. So Moses, Zipporah, and their sons set out for Egypt. Along the way, God tells Moses that Pharaoh's heart would be hard, even in the face of the miracles that God is going to work through Moses. And he tells Moses that he sees Israel as his firstborn, as God's firstborn. And if Pharaoh will not let God's firstborn go, then God will kill Pharaoh's firstborn. Then a very strange incident occurs. Very, very peculiar. On their way, they were lodging for the night someplace, and we're told that God seeks to kill Moses. It might be his son, but basically God is seeking to kill Moses. So Zipporah circumcises one of her sons, and then God relents. It's really not clear. There's a lot of things that aren't clear. First, it's not clear why one of the sons was not circumcised, but it is certainly clear that God saw this as a very important sign of his covenant, which basically sets aside Moses' whole family as Israelites and not Midianites. It does appear that after this incident, Moses goes on to Egypt alone. But notice that a life is saved by the shedding of a son's blood here. That should be a familiar theme, one that would remind you, of course, of what Jesus has done for us. Well, God tells Aaron to go out to meet Moses, to go out and meet him in the wilderness, and they meet at the mountain of God. And Moses tells Aaron there what God has said to him, what God has done, what signs God has given to him to do, and they go into Egypt before the elders of the people. And the people believe and they worship God. But things are going to get, a lot harder before they get better. Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh, and they demand in God's name that the people be allowed to hold a feast in the wilderness and to worship God. Pharaoh, he doesn't respond very well. He accuses them of being lazy. So now he demands that they have to gather their own straw for making bricks, which makes their burden, of course, even greater, because he doesn't change the number of bricks that they need to make each day. To say the least, the Israelites are not impressed by this turn of events. They blame Moses and Aaron for the extra work. Moses calls out to God, wondering why. And God responds that now he is going to do great signs against Pharaoh, until at last Pharaoh actually drives them out. God has Moses go before the people and tell them of the redemption that he will bring. But The people, they will not listen. Their grief is too great over the work that this additional work that they've been given to do on top of all the work they already have to do. God tells Moses to go back to Pharaoh and to demand Israel's release. But Moses' confidence is shaken by all of the events because no one, friend or foe, will listen to him. What's the point of talking to Pharaoh if he won't listen? That's kind of where we leave things. There's a genealogy that closes out our reading for today. Focuses on names that will be relevant to the Exodus itself. Tomorrow we'll begin to see the conflict between Pharaoh and Moses and God, between Pharaoh and Moses, well, really God, escalate. You may have noticed that as great as Moses was, he was far from a willing servant of God. Actually, he tried multiple times to get out of that service. Fortunately for us, Jesus, God's own Son, was always willing and committed to serve God. He did all that was necessary for us to be saved, including giving his own life. Would that we would be servants that way as well. May God be with you. Bless you. Bless you. We'll gather again tomorrow as we find out where things go next.